So in this section, what we're going to try and get to grips with is understanding the role that carbohydrates play in the body. Now there's terminology around different types of carbohydrates. One of the most common forms of distinguishing between different types of carbs is the simple versus complex carb. So complex carbs would be like polysaccharides, whereas simple carbohydrates would be, disaccharides. Now all these sort of biochemistry and stuff is all explained in the document that will go alongside these little presentations that we're giving. But what I wanted to speak to you today, and this is really what this course is all about, is the functional role that the carbohydrates actually have in the body. Because we can talk about disaccharides, polysaccharides, and it's all very interesting biochemistry, but what we really want to know is what is the outcome and the effect that body carb has on your energy levels, on your hormone production around after you've eaten those types of carb. What will that carbohydrate nourish you in a different way to another type of carbohydrate? What potential role will that carbohydrate have on your digestive process in terms of how much fiber it's got? What is the potential intolerance or allergy potential of that particular carb? So the classifications, simple versus complex carb, are not always fantastically useful. For example, potatoes are a complex carbohydrate, and as such are a starch, but potatoes will behave in a very sugary way in the body. And by that I mean that potatoes have a high glycemic index, and the glycemic index is one way that you can classify carbohydrates. What they do is they get a portion of this particular type of carbohydrate equivalent to 50 grams, and then they get people to eat it, and then they measure how much the blood glucose levels rises after ingesting that particular type of carbohydrate. So potatoes can often score quite high on the glycemic index, particularly if they're mashed and the skin has been taken away, so the fiber component is reduced. So depending on which studies you see, they can score quite high in the 80s. And on the flip side, if you take a simple carbohydrate like sucrose is a mix between it's an analog between glucose and fructose. Because fructose doesn't affect blood glucose that directly, what that combination does is it actually lowers the glycemic index. So sucrose scores about 67, so actually less potential effect on your blood glucose as compared with a baked potato. So when you delve more in detail into these indices, you've got the glycemic index. Now the problem with the glycemic index is because it standardizes the level of carbohydrates that you need to consume from a particular type of food, it's very easy to get 50 grams of carbs, say from rice, and then measure blood glucose. But if you try and get 50 grams of carbohydrates from carrots, you're eating many more carrots than you would normally eat in a particular portion. So over the years, a new indices came out which is called the glycemic load, and this is much more useful and practical because it's based on a commonly consumed portion of that food. So what we find in the old index is that carrots actually scored quite high on the glycemic index, but actually on the new index, when you eat a sensible portion of them, they score low on the glycemic load. And one of the reasons for that is the density of the carbohydrate in that particular food. And it's my belief that one of the secrets to long-term body composition management and keeping lean is to actually eat foods which are very high in fiber and occupy a lot of volume in terms of filling your plate, making you feel full, but actually contain low levels of available sugars, available glucose. And by that very nature, they tend to be much more nutrient dense foods. I've actually got one here. This is Cavol Nero. It's 400 grams of Cavol Nero. Delicious, doesn't take long to cook, has a very high nutrient density, and all these scales, nutrient density scales, glycemic load, glycemic index, will be sending you lists of all these. So Cavall Nero scores very high on the nutrient density scale, but 400 grams would only give you 16 grams of available carbohydrate. And eating that, I'm going to tell you now, you're going to be really full afterwards. On the flip side, you get a standard 500 gram bag of pasta. 500 grams of pasta contains around about 375 grams of available carbohydrate. So you can see volume for volume, like for like, one of them is going to provide you with heaps of energy, which you might well need, and another one's going to provide you with just a little bit of energy. So the take-home message here is eat the energy dense carbohydrates when you need to fuel or when you need to recover from activity, and then at other times eat more nutrient dense and energy sparse foods to keep you feeling full, keep your cells well nourished, and allow your body to mobilize fat as an alternative source of fuel, thereby keeping your body a little bit leaner.